Hello, everyone. It is Friday and it is cold outside. I hope you're staying warm. Thank you for joining us this chat with Matt. For those of you that are new to what we do, welcome. And for those of you that are continually watching our podcast, we really appreciate all your feedback. Thank you so much. Nadeem, this is like being back in Chicago. It's like being back home. This is crazy.
Yeah, I mean, if there's water outside, it's frozen right now.
It's frozen right now. Yeah, yeah. So it actually brings the question. I've been calling all day, and I was calling one region, and no one's in the office right now because they got a bunch of snow, and they really don't know how to deal with that. Um, I know one thing that you preach a couple years after I went years ago when I first started was disaster preparation, being ready if not necessarily something like this. This isn't really bad, but who knows? The weather. We could. We're in Houston. If Houston got 3 inches of snow, it would be game over right now. Well, but I think a lot of businesses kind of get comfortable and they don't think, well, what would happen if we can't get to the office? We're still a server based environment, yada, 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 yada. And I was hoping you could really give some guidance for small businesses to how they can be prepared because you just never know. You don't.
So let me preface that. Um, when you're getting ready to go into battle, if you're starting to prepare for that battle as you're going into battle, you're already too late. You've already lost.
That's true.
You want to prepare for the battle before you even thought about that there was going to be a battle, right? So it's the same way when it comes to disasters. You want to be prepared before you even have an inkling of a disaster. Like right now, we have the freeze, or if we know we're going to get a freeze and you think people are not going to be able to make it to the office, that's not the time to set up remote users. The time to set up remote users is when everything is fine. People are coming into the office just like normal. Everything is normal. You set up remote access for users, not when something's coming up because everybody's trying to do that at the same time. Disaster is very similar to where you all the users at your organization need to know what to do when disaster strikes before it strikes. You don't want people trying to figure out stuff when there is a disaster. There's a disaster, and then you're trying to figure out what to do, what's going on, what am I going to do, who am I going to call. That's not the right time. And disaster can be several scenarios, right? The disaster can be happen in a variety of ways. One, of course, is there's a natural disaster, right? Hurricane coming through, or Texas just freezing over. Another type of disaster is there is a breach. There is a security breach. Let's say there's a ransomware attack, right? So what do you do when there's a ransomware attack? I mean, I've seen so many times people do the absolute wrong things when something like this happens. I mean, we've talked about this. We've seen people trying to remediate themselves, trying to fix things themselves, trying to clean up their machine themselves, in the process not realizing that they are destroying forensic evidence.
Yeah.
And nowadays, with the way the insurance business is and the way security situation is right now, you don't want to come across as somebody trying to, whether intentionally or unintentionally, hide or destroy evidence.
Yep.
You want to preserve it, and you need to be prepared. Your users need to know exactly what to do when something bad happens.
Yeah.
Whether it's a security breach or a natural disaster, or any kind of issue. I mean, we have companies where they have written documentation. Everybody knows what to do because it's all written down. It's sent out to everybody. Everybody has to go through it. They do drills. Okay, today we're going to do a drill about this happened. What are you going to do? Make sure users know what to do. There are companies like, I know in the insurance business, some of our clients are in the insurance business, and they have reserved conference rooms in hotels. So it's like a standing reservation. Whenever there's an issue, their users are supposed to go to a certain hotel, certain conference room. Is it has a reservation for them for a certain amount of time. And they already know once they get there, what are they going to do? They're going to connect to the Wi-Fi. How are they going to connect to the Wi-Fi? They're going to connect to the VPN to connect to their office. How are they going to do that? They've done a drill through that. It's almost like a fire drill. It's the same thing. You don't want to do a fire drill when there is an actual fire. You want to do it before there's a fire, right? so disasters are very, it's a similar thing. And the most worrisome thing is, you would not believe how many businesses do not have any plans on what to do when there is a disaster.
Yeah.
Right? See, I didn't say if there is a disaster. I said when there is a disaster.
Nadeem always used to say that exactly. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Yeah, and I mean, we do this internally as well, so we know what we're going to do. I mean, our techs know what are they going to do when there's a disaster. How are they going to connect? How are they going to provide support? Who's going to man phones? What's going to happen? What kind of ticket volume are we going to expect? What's the escalation process going to be? And all these things, everybody needs to kind of be on the same page. There should never be a time when somebody's kind of looking around, oh, I don't know what to do. Well, let me do what he's doing. That's not going to work. Everybody has their role. They need to do what they're supposed to be doing, and not trying to figure out what to do when there is a disaster, because that's the worst time to try to figure out. And most times, if you try to figure something out, you're going to end up doing more damage than good.
That's true. So. Let me ask you this, Nadeem, because it's. I mean, you brought up the ransomware, which is a disaster, and that was like a big thing. And of course, we're going through all these weather changes. Is there anything that is just a baseline, whether it be backing up information, whatever, just baseline that businesses can do to say, okay, do we have a contingency plan that's exact? No, but at the very basic level, we have this done. Is that something that can be done where they're like, we backed up our information, blah blah blah?
Yeah, so there are some good sample / baseline documents available from NIST, and you can go to NIST.gov and just download some of these documents, tweak them, customize them for yourself, and then over time you can enhance them. But they're a good starting point. You want to have one for security breach, so basically a security disaster. You want to have one for disaster recovery, during natural disasters. Get some of these things in place ahead of time before something happens. Now, for a lot of companies, if they have cyber insurance, their cyber insurance companies are already asking them for, hey, what is your disaster plan? They will ask you in that questionnaire. And if you have checked the box that you have a disaster plan and you cannot produce it when there is a disaster,
that's a problem.
That's a bad place to be in. So if you said you have a disaster plan, make sure it's not in your head. It has to be on paper, and it has to be something that people understand, that people know what to do. It's like a business plan. If you write it down and put it in a drawer, it has some effect, but not the right type of effect if you have it in the drawer and then every so often you open it up and you actually read it. You try to follow it. That's when you get the proper effect of it. Not saying that don't write it down. I mean, yeah, if you write it down and put it in a drawer and forget about it, that's better than not writing it down in the first place. At least you have some idea of what you're going to do. But then if you routinely inspect it, go through it, tweak it, enhance it, and your users know what to do, that's where you want to be.
So, in regards to, and maybe we've talked about this in the past as far as the whole thing with cyber insurance, and I just think that needs to be kind of touched on just a touch. how often are you seeing where businesses will say they have a disaster plan and they actually don't? Is it a high number? Because I'm thinking that happens more often than not. Based on some of the things I've been reading about small business, SMBs, and cybersecurity, it's not encouraging, like at all. I mean, some of the numbers that I'm hearing as far as that I'm reading, as far as uh, um, the number of small businesses that go under. So if I'm hearing you correctly, it doesn't matter if you have cybersecurity insurance. If they don't see a concrete plan, you're pretty much SOL. Is that correct?
Well, it depends on your carrier, but we're seeing more and more carriers are on the ship where if you say you're doing certain things, or if you say you have a plan and you don't, um, number one, if you can't produce it, they're just going to deny it. I mean, we're seeing so many denials right now. Number two, if you say you did and they did not check it, but then something happens and they say, oh, by the way, I need to see your plan, and you cannot produce it. Keep in mind, this is after you've gone. I mean, think about the level of frustration and anxiety. You already had a disaster. Now you're trying to reach out to your insurance provider. Hey, I need to, I need you to take care of some of this damage because my customers are screaming down my throat. And they say, well, show me, so and so document. And if you cannot produce that, I mean, that's just a bad situation to be in. I mean, you're just getting hit from multiple sides now. And don't even think about for a minute that you can just write something up real quick. These plans are insurance company people. They're professionals.
They know they
They
can
can
they
see
can
through it
tell.
real easy, real
Yeah,
quick.
yeah.
I mean, we've helped a bunch of customers, preparing their disaster recovery and security documents and plans, plans and procedures. And a lot of times they're pretty comprehensive. They have to cover so many different angles, and then once you send it to the insurance provider, the cybersecurity insurance provider, they may have certain additional clauses that they want you to mention in your plan that then gets disseminated to all the users on, maybe how to handle certain things. But going forward, we're going to see more and more where these insurance providers are relying on forensics to figure out what happened and get a timeline of events on what happened. And we're seeing that a lot of times they run into a situation where the business may have said they are doing certain things, and it could be something as simple as business saying they have complex passwords when they don't. Business saying they expire passwords, and for 5 or 6 service accounts, they never expired passwords. And it's an easy way for the insurance company to say, well, you didn't follow your own protocol, so we're not going to cover it, or we're going to just give you a fraction of what we owe you.
Oof, that's
Yeah. And that's why a lot of business, that's why some of the numbers are so scary, that you see a lot of businesses who, post disaster, they're trying to get coverage from their insurance companies, and their insurance companies are not giving them what they expect. And that's when, I mean, for a large enterprise, 200,000, a few million is no big deal. But for small business, you get hit by even $1 million, and let's say your coverage was for 5 million, and they're saying, oh no, we're going to pay you 200,000. It's like
yeah, yeah.
that's why companies are going under, is because they just can't. And the other side of the equation is, people, since they don't get exposed to this data, that how many companies have breaches. There's a much you cannot imagine the number of companies who have security issues, and then the number of companies who actually, like, if there is an issue, they actually pay the bad guys. Because why would somebody pay the bad guys? Because they were not prepared. They didn't
Yeah.
have the backups in place. They didn't have the redundancies in place. They didn't have any process or procedure. So they end up paying the bad guys, which
Hey,
basically just makes the bad guys bolder.
now let me just real quickly. I just for the people's information. These are some numbers based on what Nadine was saying. 43% of cyber attacks, 43 percent of cyber attacks attack small businesses. 47% of small businesses had at least one cyber attack in the past year. 44 of those had 2 to 4 attacks. 70% of small businesses are unprepared to deal with cyber. 70%.
Yeah. You know, one of the interesting facts about those numbers is the percentage of companies that have been hit multiple times.
Yes.
And I've seen this firsthand where there will be an attack, and then right on the heels of it, there will be another attack, because now the bad guys are like, hey, we have a foot in the door. Let's just keep going. They want to keep pushing it. And we see that. So I believe those numbers. That's
one other one, and I hate to cut you off, but this is really glaring. 60%, 60% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months of a cyber attack. 60%.
Wow. That's a huge number.
That's a massive
and what are these?
number.
Where are these numbers coming from?
So I'm looking at PurpleSec USA, purplesec.us, and they have a resource on cybersecurity statistics. And so they have trend reports, breach report resources. So I've been reading about it a lot, and man, some of the stuff that it's something else. It's something else.
Yeah, and I believe it, and maybe I'm I believe it easier than a lot of other people, just because I get I deal with it on an ongoing basis. And that's why, like, I talk to customers, and I talk about networks, and I talk about VLANs and how to separate your traffic, because you don't want one type of traffic to run on the same segment as other types of traffic. Basically, you want to separate traffic on different pipes, so to speak, so they don't intermingle. And there's some, of course, redundancy, performance is one thing, but there's a security component to that. If you're writing your, let's say, your wireless your wireless network on the same segment as your regular data network or your VoIP network, I mean, yeah, performance is one thing, but then what about the security aspect of things? People don't think about that, as they're designing their infrastructure. And a lot of times what happens is companies are small. It's nothing that they have to worry about when they're small, because they're only thinking performance, and they're like, we're small, we're not going to have that much volume. But they're forgetting the security aspect of it. They design their network a certain way, and then they blow up and they get big. They get to 100, 150 users, and now it's so painful to re-architect their network, because it's all done. It's like you have a building already erected. How are you going to change the foundation? It's not easy, and that's what they run into.
Yeah, and we've seen that. Nadeem has seen that quite a few times, where Nadeem will tell them, like, "Hey, you're growing. You might want to let's rethink some things." And then boom, they grow. And then things such as I know with QuickBooks, that was like a big thing, where a company would grow and they'll outgrow. And Nadeem was like, you might want to, we might want to make some changes here. And now they've grown past what they're able to efficiently operate as far as their network is concerned. And it's like he sees it all the time. He tries to tell people, like, hey, this is a red light, this is a siren. And it isn't until it becomes an emergency that it becomes an emergency, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So my advice to everybody out there who's listening is, go back to that drawer where you think you saved your process and procedures on what to do in an emergency, what to do in a disaster. Review those documents. Set aside, like, maybe a few hours a quarter or a few hours a year. Just review it once a year. I mean, that's not that much time. And you'll be much better prepared to survive when a disaster strikes, as opposed to, what was that, 48% of the other companies who are going to go out of business when disaster strikes, right?
60%.
60%. Yeah. So don't be part of that 60%. So that's my advice to everybody. And I think with that we'll close it. We'll it's cold. I know people don't want to watch long videos. Well, maybe they do. I don't know, but I'm sure they don't want to hear me talking. They want to watch some other kind of videos, right? um, so everybody have a great day, and we'll see you next week. Stay warm, and hopefully everybody has a great weekend.
Everyone have a good one.